Hi, good evening. I'm Dr. Philip McMillan, and I'm here to share with you an important topic that has caught my attention with regards to pilot risk is passenger risk. And I am genuinely surprised at the amount of industries across the world that are potentially willing to sacrifice their reputation just because they don't want to challenge and ask very important, difficult questions. I'll be focusing on a recent presentation with regards to a newspaper article. I think it was out of India, and in this article here, what they had highlighted was that there were a number of deaths across the industry just recently, and I'll be going through that, sharing what they've said, and sharing a few ideas as to why I think this could be happening. Before I start, I want to encourage you to register below for my upcoming presentation on the infertility nightmare. And this is based, as usual, about my research into autoimmunity and the impact infection, recurrent infection, the immune system can have long term on this very delicate balance. I'll be sharing some insights with you if you're interested, so please register at the link below. It will be next week, Thursday. So, coming back to the challenges that are facing us today, why is the airline industry almost ignoring what could be a very, very significant trend? Now, it may be just quite a small trend. And so when we look at this here, I'll just go through this newspaper article here. What it's highlighting, and this was on the 17th of August, this was another pilot dead, five cases of cardiac arrest among pilots, three died in a week. This was in technically occurring just recently, and they were saying that in August 2023 they had seen a distressing number of in-flight health emergencies claiming the lives of multiple pilots. This one was specifically related to an Indigo pilot who fell unconscious and collapsed on boarding. This was in India. But they also mentioned another pilot in that week flying from Miami to Santia in Chile, and another pilot flying from Sarasota to Newark, and as well another pilot from Sapporo to Taipei. So all of these cases were happening across the world around the same time. Now, it could be purely coincidental, but it's not the first time that I've seen this kind of article. And I think that it means, therefore, that this should be investigated much more thoroughly. Here is why I think it's very, very important. When we look at some of the recent research that has been coming out, and I'm sharing with you again this paper here, and this paper is showing you that in July 2023, this was a Swiss based paper looking at sex specific differences in myocardial injury incidence after the COVID mRNA booster vaccination. So they were again looking carefully at cardiac troponin levels. This is a measure of cardiac damage. Now, these were small changes, but quite significant among 777 participants. Essentially, what they found was that 1 in 35 persons, 2.8%, had some degree of damage to the heart. Even though it was a small change, it was likely to represent an element of myocarditis. This is very important because if this is occurring across the population, especially in pilots, and you have to remember pilots are in a unique category, they are very, very strictly monitored. And it's because the industry takes safety so seriously. And there is so much to learn from the airline industry because so few tragedies happen. They are almost the safest form of travel across the world. Why would they risk this reputation? Because they don't want to ask difficult questions. Here again, another important part, and this technically puts it in context. Pilot cardiac evaluation for fitness for duty. The industry takes this very, very seriously. An annual medical incapacitation risk is for 1% per annum in a two pilot public transportation is used in assessing pilot fitness to fly in many medical situations. They do this almost annually after someone has reached 40 years. They do a number of things. They look at ECGs, looking for arrhythmias, bradyarrhythmias, Wolff Parkinson White syndrome, atrial fibrillation, valvular heart disease. So they're looking at echocardiograms. They're looking at coronary heart disease and the intervention. Very, very serious in that if there is coronary heart disease, a 6 month grounding period is required in the United Kingdom before a cardiologist assessment. So this is taken extremely seriously, even hypertension. And so when we look at what the industry has done to bring about safety, to build public confidence, I really wonder why they are not looking at this. And if they are, they're doing it very, very quietly. They're not letting the public know. And the public do have a right to know if these things are relevant. Protect the interest of the industry. Now, part of the reason why I think that this is very, very important is because many people only look at myocarditis risk. Now, remember, I said it was a 1 in 35 risk across the population who had been boosted. If we consider that many cases of myocarditis are silent, and so this is what this paper was doing. In this paper, they were looking at intramyocardial inflammation after COVID vaccines, and they were doing biopsy cases. Very, very detailed study from Germany. And one of the cases in this had stood out to me, and it was what I called silent myocarditis, vaccine induced myocarditis. In this case, this patient, one of the patients, only 38 years old, you'd have to look in the paper to see it, but she had barely any chest pains. She was just short of breath on exertion. All the investigations turned out to be normal until they did the biopsy and found significant myocarditis. That's how subtle it can be. And if you're having myocarditis occurring in a significant amount of the airline industry, the problem is that pilots are under a significant amount of stress because of the changes in the air pressure, the oxygenation, the long hours that they do. It's no surprise that the industry has taken it in the past so seriously to make sure that the pilots are healthy and that it is safe for all the passengers. My thought is that the current level of investigations are probably not going to be enough. I think it is worth the industry taking a big step to look in much more detail to screen for myocarditis among the pilots, because if it is present, it represents a risk in the medium to longer term. Why would they not want to know? When we look at this study here, this one was done in 2022, last year, in March 2022. And they were just looking at 16 adolescents who had myocarditis, 12 to 17 years old. And they were looking in significant detail at some of the changes that occurred with regards to them. One of the things that they used to investigate them was the cardiac MRI, and it's increasingly been identified as an important diagnostic tool for myocarditis because it can identify subclinical injury and fibrosis, that's where scar tissue, by markers of LGE and edema. LGE is late gadolinium enhancement. It's a specific tool that's measured in MRI. And what they found in these young people was that a proportion of them, even after 6 months or so, still had evidence of scarring with regards to their heart. Now, what I think the industry should do, and this is just my humble opinion, But if there is a trajectory where a proportion of pilots are affected with myocarditis, with long term fibrosis, and increased risk of arrhythmias over the longer term when their heart is put under stress, I think the industry should make sure that this is not the case across a significant proportion of their pilots. The only way they will do that is to invest financially into looking at MRIs of the heart. All the pilots who have already died should have detailed autopsy examinations, especially of the heart, looking for histological examinations or histological evidence of inflammation and fibrosis related to myocarditis. I think this should be publicly available because this is in the interest of the public. It's not just in the interest of the industry. And so I think that this should stand as an important point, an important mark where an industry is ensuring that it is looking in detail and it is protecting the interest, the public interest of the passengers. That's just my thought on the issue. I think that we should all push the industry to make sure that this is not a trend and that even if the smallest change occurs across the pilots, they should do detailed investigations and share it with the public as well. Have a great evening.